And boom. Episode 60. Christopher Vu.
60. Is that where we're at?
We are
I
recording
guess so.
right now. How about that?
Noah, how are you?
I'm well. Before we get into it, as always, we got to shout out our sponsor, Crown Rash Guards, for supporting the podcast and sponsoring this episode. You can find them on their website, crownrashguards.com, or social media on Instagram and Facebook at Crown Rash Guards. And guys, we have an exclusive promo code, 20% off a single rash guard. Just use promo code BREWS. And
Brews, right?
plural. And
Plural.
I know Tristan said he ordered one,
Nice.
and he said I should have debuted it today, but he didn't. But we're doing ghee today, so yeah, great product, solid, durable, holds up great. If you're looking for something sleek, definitely check them out. If you're looking for like a fancy design and stuff, that's not the place to look. But check them out. Highly recommended. They've held up well over 3-4 weeks now. Been using them heavily, and they're just a great, solid product. And the story behind the company is awesome. As I said before, the dude who wanted to address kind of his own concern with you. I mean, he's a jiu-jitsu guy, so he wanted to come for himself, and then he ended up solving it for others too. So his name's Anmar, Crown Rash Guard. You can read their story online on their website. It's a real cool story. So support small business, support jiu-jitsu guys, and support Crown Rash Guard. So, Chris.
Yeah, man.
The big story right now is non-jiu-jitsu. Well, it is jiu-jitsu because you can't train, but you, how many days removed are you from receiving your vasectomy?
I had it done. It was originally scheduled for Thursday at 4:30, but I suspect, which was not Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. But I suspect everybody was trying to just get the F out of the office as soon as possible. So they called me and were like, "Hey, can you come at what's it called? 11 instead." So yeah, I basically had the day off. I mean, it would have been an early day at work anyway, but I had some car issues that again, but this one was due to stupidity, not so much something going wrong. But I needed an alignment very badly because I may or may not have bumped into a concrete pillar, which evidently bent the struts in my vehicle, which was not so cool. It's not the cheapest thing either. So I dropped my vehicle off. I ended up missing work that day. It's fine. It was it's typically a slow day anyway. And I taught jiu-jitsu that morning. My last class for a little bit. Pretty decent.
Are people aware that you are on the DL right now?
I made them aware.
Okay.
So I reached out to Paul to see if he can cover for 1 week because that's how long my doctor said I definitely need to not do anything. Just the risk of bruising and complications and whatnot. I mean, like they're literally separating pieces of you inside. So like you don't want anything to bleed and go wrong and that sort of thing. But yeah, I went at 11 and I was out of there by 12:15, 12:30 at the latest. And I actually would have been out of there sooner had Stacy and Connor not run off to go get some lunch because I didn't realize I need to have my ride there for whatever reason. So they ran over to Target to go get some toys and whatever it is and grab a quick bite. And I called them back. I'm like, hey, they won't operate on me until y'all get back here. So they got back. I had to wait probably about 20, 30 minutes. And that was that. So I got a little laughing gas, which I've never done before, and was talking about jiu-jitsu and weightlifting the entire time while basically high. And then dude was snipping at my nuts.
That's amazing.
Yeah. He's a CrossFitter, right? So
did you talk about community like we did in the last podcast?
I didn't. I made sure not to offend the person who's literally removing, my ability to reproduce at any given time. So I was like, I'll be as I was definitely cussing a lot more than I realized. Which I guess under laughing gas, you don't really realize what you're doing. I mean, even though you kind of do. I mean, I was pretty lucid.
I mean, do you remember the procedure?
Yeah, man. Like
Okay,
it's
so
I've
you remember it. You just recognize now that you were behaving differently as a result of the
it
laughing.
was basically drunk Chris. It was, I actually killed the entire canister of nos, because the girl who it's a really awkward procedure. People, I don't go to the doctor that often. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up because pollen is at a 9.1 today, which is terrible. But anyways, the I don't go to the doctor that often, or if ever. Um, so people like really nonchalant about like being around your balls and stuff. It's really really awkward. But a lot of people walking in and out, and so they I totally took some laughing gas because they're like, oh, traditionally we would offer people like a Percocet or prescribe them like a Percocet or something, which I'm not sure that's a painkiller or an anti-anxiety drug or whatever the case is. But they said, like it's sort of like an unreliable thing because we don't know how long it takes for it to kick in, because like we'd give it to people like when they got to the office basically, and even after like 30 minutes they'd be getting ready for the operation, and like the Percocet wouldn't have kicked in yet. So they're sitting there like freaking out and stuff. And then, so they're like, yeah, laughing gas is almost like an immediate thing. Like within like one or two puffs, like you're already, like you're like two or three margaritas in. And so I did that, and like two or three puffs in, I was like, hey, I don't feel anything yet. Like, oh, keep going. I was like, all right. And within probably about 10 or 12 puffs, it was definitely, I can see how that would make people less anxious to have their teeth and whatnot operated on. Um, but whatever local anesthetic they were using was, I wouldn't say it was completely um, like effective, because I could definitely still feel stuff going on down there.
Oh boy!
I mean, like it was. I mean,
Did you
or
look
maybe
down
no, no,
or
no.
like?
You're like I'm like staring at the ceiling and stuff, and like
And they probably got like something covering that area, so it's like if you
no,
look
I mean
down,
it's
you
just
can
it's
see
like a
them
big.
anyway.
I mean, it's not. It's they have to operate on it, right? So it's just a big ass like tarp with like a
Yeah,
hole cut out where you like
yeah.
your balls stick through, and then they do what they got to do. So like even if I wanted to look down, I kind of couldn't because I'm like laying back. But so yeah, so the guy's like, I'm trying to just not. I mean, I wasn't freaking out in the first place. I was actually fairly calm about it. But he was like, I was like, is this stuff like a just an anti anxiety thing, or is it actually an anesthetic? He's like, I mean, it's supposed to be an anesthetic. I'm like, I definitely just felt you poke my balls, man. And he's like, yeah, you'll probably feel, you probably felt a pinch. That was like the local and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that I felt it. So yeah, that I'm not gonna flinch or anything. I'm good, but like I definitely felt that. I'm like, aren't I supposed to feel nothing? He's like, well, you know, you're a bigger dude and stuff. I was like, well, am I really that big? Like, I'm like 182 pounds right now. Like, this is that really much larger than the average person? And he's kind of like, how long did it take you to for the laughing gas to kick in? I was like, I don't know, like 12, 20 puffs or something. He's like, yeah, it should have worked at about like 5. I was like, oh, okay. Well,
Look
he's
at
like,
you, highly resistant. You're like a mutant.
either
Your
that. I
healing
mean, he
factor is
said he's like,
kicking in.
you're also just like just metabolically like larger than like a normal person. So I'm like, it just takes a little bit longer for it to get throughout your system. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
You're metabolically larger. What does that mean?
I think it's just I would have more lean mass than like your average person. So he's like,
Mm,
it just takes longer to get through all your blood vessels and all that sort of stuff. I'm like,
you
okay, cool.
thoroughbred, you.
So, um,
So you're 3 days removed from this
yeah,
procedure.
it
How
was.
do you feel?
I actually feel pretty okay. I mean, like I can definitely feel the stitches down there. Like it's. I mean, even despite being not even a centimeter long, like it's just your balls are stitched, man. Like I can feel the stitching like snagging on my clothes and stuff, and like just any sort of like excess of movement, I could feel it kind of pulling at it. I mean, like they cut into your body, right? Um, so that's a little bit uncomfortable. Like there's a very dull and persistent. Even though I've been taking I mean, I haven't been like overdosing on Tylenol by any means. I'm just doing the whole prescribed, like 2 Tylenol, 500 milligrams, whatever, every 4 or 5 hours. Um, but it's definitely a dull, like I've been kicked, like a dull and persistent. I've just been kicked in the nuts feeling, which is kind of uncomfortable. But other than that, like I'm all right. Otherwise, like day one was pretty uncomfortable. Like immediately after when I got home at like one or 1:30 or whatever the case was, and just the rest of the night, it was pretty painful, I guess. But I mean, like it wasn't anything that we haven't dealt with
Were
before.
you able to sleep?
No, I wasn't. I mean, like I tried to, because Stacy's kind of handling all the baby duties or the kid duties the rest of the night because I was supposed to have been laying down for a full day, 24 hours. So I kind of judged it from like actual snip time at like let's say noon until noon the next day. I was supposed to be laying flat, and so like at some point like after dinner, like I sat up for dinner and whatnot and ate and stuff, but like gravity, you can definitely feel like blood pooling and whatnot, which makes it a little bit heavier feeling, which is not the most comfortable. So like I was in bed by 7:30 ish, and mind you, it was also New Year's Eve, right? So I was in bed, I was reading, and just fell asleep, and was woken up by fireworks, which was terrible, at like 11:15, 11:20 or so. Which people they're just fucking fire fireworks for an hour and a half straight. So I was like, well, my balls hurt, and these fireworks are going up. I can't quite sleep. So I just went out to the couch and like laid down and popped on some jiu-jitsu videos and just watched that while I was trying to kind of force myself back to sleep, which that never works, when you're like trying to force yourself to sleep. Um, so I think I actually fell asleep last time I looked at my clock at like 2. So I was like laying
Now,
there in like
were
mild pain.
you're actually able to lie down? In fact, they're encouraging you to lie down. It's not like you had to like recline in a chair because I know people, for example, when they get shoulder surgery, it's like you can't lie down. You have to like sleep in a chair for a few weeks
Right.
because of the. With this procedure, you were able to lie, as you would say, purely supine.
Oh yeah. Like that was encouraged. That was what I was supposed to do. So I did. I mean, like I was. It's really interestingly surprising. That's how I sleep in the first place. But when you have to like force yourself to do that for almost 24 hours, it's actually gets kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, you
And
get
like,
fidgety.
what's that?
You get fidgety.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like even if I like kind of prop myself up, like I would kind of sit up how you would, like if you're reading in your bed, right? Like leaning against the headboard or whatever the case is. Even like sitting like that, like I think with the blood sort of like not like coming to its level throughout your body and like pulling towards your lower extremities and whatnot, like that even became a little bit uncomfortable. So I was like, oh, like I guess I'll just force myself to lay back and do my thing. And but so yeah, I did that for a day until yesterday at about 1 ish. I kind of started getting up and moving around a little bit more, but like I'm not supposed to be lifting anything, which is kind of annoying. Like even they're like, yeah, don't lift anything over 10 pounds, that's obnoxious, because like there's not a lot around that's like less than 10 pounds. But so yeah, today was the first day I've been up and just moving around, but I can definitely, I feel the need, or rather I have to be very cognizant of like what I'm doing at that very moment, even just like bending down to pick something up. Like I could feel like tugs at the stitches and stuff, so that's a little bit annoying.
Okay, so here's sophomore question number one here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what happens if you have a boner right now? Is that going to like rip everything up?
No, I mean it's not. The stitches are very small, man. Like I think it's like I was trying to examine like the open wounds to see like if I'm like, God, do I need to put like Neosporin on my balls? Like what is they didn't really give me a lot of like instruction for actual like wound care.
Okay.
Like it was just a matter of like a couple pieces of gauze to basically provide padding from the surface of the inside surface of like my boxer briefs and like the wound area. So it's like 2 or 3 layers of gauze. So when I was actually allowed to take a shower today.
So are the stitches going to be removed, or are these stitches that
It's
dissolve over
the
time?
dissolving kind. I've never had stitches that I can really remember, other than like my like wisdom teeth. But there's like 2 stitches in each one. It's like very minimal,
Mhm.
you know. But it's not. But because like that area is very, the skin is very flexible. It's not going to provide so much tug on it. Because like when you get a boner, right? Like your balls don't get hard, right? Like we're getting really weird here, but so it's not
I
like,
get it. I get
yeah.
it. I
So
didn't.
it's not actively pulling on that, right? Like
Yeah.
it just becomes less loose, essentially.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. Very
but
interesting.
yeah, it's definitely it's an experience. Like the dull nut shot feeling is a little annoying, but that should be gone by tomorrow, I think.
Hey
So,
man, we just imagine you just went with that schizo wipeout, and they learned the knee cut for the first time,
oh my god,
and they
like
just came straight in hard.
it would just be terrible. Like it would actually honestly probably be worse than what I'm experiencing right now, too. Just for the purpose of like hell, I had anesthesia, right?
Correct.
And now it's subsiding, which is nice, which amazes me how quickly the body can like heal itself up. But I so you said there was class today, or there was not a class. It was sort of a
No, we
unofficial.
are the gym is open. It's showtime.
I thought there was no class today, and it was starting again Sunday. Or is that
No, it was
incorrect?
no class New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Oh, okay.
Today is January 2nd, so there was all levels jiu-jitsu at 11, bag and pad at 12.
Hmm.
Tomorrow there will be gi jiu-jitsu at 10 a.m. And there is debate right now about whether we will be doing a new schedule this coming week or go one more full week of
Holiday
holiday
schedule.
schedule before kicking it in. Thought process being, Paul still thinks since college students don't start next week, they're going to start coming back maybe next week, that it might be dead anyway. And again, we're recording this on January 2nd. So by the time this comes out, if you're a gym member, you probably know the answer to this. Or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I can't read the future. But the new schedule for 2021 is going to feature more classes than ever before.
Ever.
Correct.
Really?
Ever.
I mean, are they? Well, are we allowed
I
to
haven't
discuss?
seen the
It's like
schedule.
inside baseball here, but like,
I
where
haven't
are all
seen
these
the
classes?
schedule.
Where are all these
I haven't
instructors
seen the
coming from?
schedule. I don't know what these classes are, but Paul's goal is to offer more because it's such a good selling point for the gym.
Yeah.
The question is, are the regular attendance numbers going to be back next week or the following week? Because what's the point of doing this brand new schedule with all these new classes if that people aren't coming yet? So that's, I think, his internal debate. So we'll find out.
That's an interesting thing. We'll have to like. I wonder what his thought process is in like what metrics is he using to like is like a lot more classes, or some people, or some classes going to end up taking away from other classes? Is it going to reduce the class size for whatever class is there to that'll where they'll be so small it'll be less attractive to train it, you know what I mean, like that sort of thing. Obviously he's thought this out, otherwise he wouldn't be executing it.
Well, the
I'm kind of
issue is,
curious.
yeah. So the other thing is, there are a couple factors at play that I'm aware of. But there might be like new classes that I haven't heard of being offered. You know, that to me is the curious thing: is are we going to have classes that we haven't offered before? So we obviously have a large jiu-jitsu mat space now, and a dedicated Muay Thai area. And right now, at the holiday schedule, with one class every hour, both areas are not being used simultaneously. And obviously, Paul's goal, one of the goals with this new schedule, is to, at the hours the classes are offered, make sure that both those mat spaces are being utilized simultaneously, because he's paying rent for that.
Yeah, of
Otherwise, he
course.
wouldn't need to be in such a large gym. So prior to Christmas break, we had gi jiu-jitsu offered in two levels. We had fundamentals and intermediate and advanced. So we had split gi jiu-jitsu into two classes. There were no all level classes anymore. It
Right.
was, except on maybe Sunday. And Muay Thai was still an all levels class. My understanding is
Okay.
jiu-jitsu is going to be split again into level 1 and then level 2 and above, if we're operating with the level system that he did prior to COVID. So that would be if I had to bet money, that's where I would bet we would be expanding classes, is splitting the Muay Thai now into two sections. Are there other classes that we haven't offered before, or a specialty type class that we haven't offered before? That I don't know. That is, I'm just like the rest of us. We'll wait and see.
Hmm.
So it's going to be, it'll be interesting. I think, for me selfishly, my big thing is the last week or the last few weeks. This holiday schedule hasn't been great for me personally in my jiu-jitsu, because I'm on the hook to teach most of those days, because there are people that are part of the foundation's curriculum that
Right.
are going through that. So I need to teach that. But as long as intermediate advanced jiu-jitsu is split from fundamentals, then I can teach during the fundamental hour, because that's when foundations is offered,
Right.
and train during the other. And then we'll see about no-gi and where that's scheduled, and if it's scheduled opposite a gi jiu-jitsu class, or if it's scheduled against a Muay Thai class, you know. And then lastly, there were two MMA classes prior to the break. We'll see if there are two MMA classes or more or less, with this new schedule. So
I mean, it was
I think,
also two MMA classes that seem to be growing in popularity based solely on the instructor, right? So,
yeah, but also the other factor that I haven't touched on yet is time. So I said he wants to maximize mat space. The other issue is there's a huge difference between attendance in 6 to 7, 7 to 8, than the 8 to 9 time slot. The 8 to 9 time slot is a lot quieter. It's a lot slower
oh, I bet
than anywhere between 6 and 8. So
slower in terms of number of attendance, not necessarily level of energy, though, right? Or
I'm talking about attendance. I'm talking about
purely attendance. Okay.
who's coming into the gym at that
Yeah,
time.
eight to nine is late, man. So if they want to make a top heavy schedule where
So
it's
he definitely wants to double book. I would imagine 6 to 7, 7 to 8, and then 8 to 9. Maybe it's double book, but you have to be very strategic in how you're double booking that.
yeah,
It seems like beginners are in it. So at least from jiu-jitsu point of view, there are more white belts that are able to come from 8 to 9 than
is that
non-white
so?
belts. Yes, I do think that is. I think it's just a correlation with age, that if you're a colored belt, you've been training for a period of time, so you're older as a result. And if you're
Right. Yeah.
older,
Yeah.
you're less likely to go 8 to 9, because you probably have a family and obligations. Whereas, I'm a college student, I'm a white belt, I'm just getting out of study session at 7 o'clock anyway. So let me swing over to the gym, train from 8 to 9, and, you know, do my thing. So, I think that anecdotally can account for some of what's going on, at least
Hmm.
currently with our student base. But we'll see. I'm interested to see the new schedule, like everybody else, and figure out what my training is going to be a schedule as a result, just like every other student at the gym.
All right. And we'll see either this week or the week after. So hopefully it's the week
Exactly.
after. I'll be back on the mats by then. So
Yeah, and I definitely am curious to see, for example, if no gi is going to be offered as a single class, or is that going to be tiered as well, like no gi fundamentals and advanced no gi.
Well, I have
Like,
to. I mean, I'm curious because I don't do nogi. But do you having done a lot of nogi lately? Is there a huge skill disparity?
yes,
Okay, so then there
there
should
is,
probably be.
but the assumption is that it's taught as though you know some jujitsu. You
Right.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
but
That's.
right now I would say it's 2/3 white belts
Is it really?
and 1/3 hot. Yeah, during in the evening, in the middle of the day, it's almost all colored belts. So there's also a discrepancy between the midday classes
Sure.
and the afternoon classes. The noon classes typically skew
Advanced.
more colored, more advanced. Exactly.
Yeah.
But will there be Muay Thai classes offered in the noontime hour? That I don't know. We'll see.
Is it necessary? I mean, that's the thing. Is like, is it even a request? Like.
Again, this is where Paul's gone off into his world, and sometimes he's guilty of saying, "Hey guys, like if you have feedback about the schedule, let me know." And it's like, well, if we don't see the schedule, how can I give you feedback
Yeah,
on it?
exactly.
Like I can give you random requests, but that was better is if you showed me something tangible, and then I could say, well, this is what I forecast. This is my feedback on this attempt. This
Yeah.
attempt schedule. But I think like anything, you put out the schedule, and then you can make adjustments. There's nothing stopping you from a couple weeks later being like, all right, guys, clearly, nobody's attending this class, so we're going to move this over here, or, stuff like that. So we'll see. It might just turn out to be just like I said, splitting up the Muay Thai classes into two sections, level 1 and then
Right.
level 2 and above, or there could be some more. Maybe we're going to bring back ranked rash guards for MMA. For all I know,
Ooh.
I'm just making that. That's strictly coming from me. I didn't hear anything. I'm just saying, what's
We
old
might
is
have a
good.
good supplier for that if that's the case.
I. This is true. So yeah, it's there was a decent turnout today in terms of class, but still, they're definitely not the numbers we're used to seeing, especially for a single jiu-jitsu class.
It's the holidays too. I mean, it's people are just really taking advantage of this long weekend, I suppose.
Absolutely. So we'll see. But in the meantime, just studying, thinking about what I want to practice, and yeah, trying to get rolls in wherever I can. So
Have you noticed? So you kind of touched on something earlier. Now that you are responsible for teaching more,
mhm.
and it's clearly cutting into your training time a little bit. Does that make you hungrier to train, or does it make you just want to get the f out of the gym a little bit more because you're obligated to be there?
No, I want to train, and I'm envious of the reps other people are getting.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's really because we're on a holiday schedule where there's only one jujitsu
Yeah,
class.
yeah, that's very true.
So once we split the classes again, then I'll be able to get my reps. Now, if fundamentals turns into a class that is as a result of having foundations, does that make the fundamentals class a class that is appealing to not just white belts but all belt levels because it's like fundamental stuff that's important for everybody? Then I might actually be kind of like sad in a way that I don't get reps doing that. But if it's still a class that feels more like a white belt class, then no, I won't feel like I'm missing out on anything. So it just kind of depends on what the content of the fundamentals class is that's going on simultaneously with the foundations class that I'm responsible for.
That also might be a huge factor in that is who is teaching the fundamentals class.
Yeah,
So, I
and
mean, to
and there's
see
a
what.
whole like the whole curriculum thing
Yeah,
because did we talk about this last time
I think
where
we
I was
might have.
talking about we need to have like a beginner blue belt class?
Yeah. No. I mean, we touched upon the idea of a curriculum.
No, I think I was talking to someone else about this. So to me, like we've the issue to me is we've got like we're trying to have people smoothly and gradually up the intensity. And with jujitsu, there are leaps. One leap is right away. You get thrown in, and it's like, oh my god, I'm overwhelmed with all this stuff. So that was what was like going into fundamentals class. You would go into fundamentals class. There were no stripe white belts. There were 3 stripe white belts. There were 4 stripe. There were colored belts. And there's a huge difference between a no stripe white belt and a 2 stripe white belt. Let
Yes.
alone, and then a 4 stripe white belt is also very different. So by adding a foundations class, you've now drawn a circle and isolated the brand new people, put them in kind of a safe space with people their own level, and the goal is give them the tools to have the basics and those foundations and be able to defend themselves to some degree when they go into fundamentals class. So now there's not such a steep learning curve right away. That I think smooths the curve. The other place where I feel like there's a gap that would be the next thing that I would add, but obviously this is less important, but definitely it's a worthwhile thing, is brand new blue belts. That's
You
where I
think
think
so?
there's another. Yes, because I think when you're a brand new blue belt, you're now thrust into a class where there might be an assumption that advanced guards when you actually don't. So I think like brand new blue belts need to be taught De La Hiva. They need to be taught Spider Guard. They need to be taught Deep Half. They need to be taught some of these X guard, single leg X, more advanced guards, so that then everything after that they can grasp. To me, there's like more things to fill in. And if you can fill them in first for a brand new blue belt, now they're
Hmm.
prepared for the more advanced material that comes up when chaining all this stuff
I'd have to
together.
take a look at the blue belt or the white to blue curriculum because I thought a lot of that stuff is on there. I could be wrong. I don't. I've
No,
never had to look at it. So.
there's only some basic half guard, like a basic half guard sweep,
Oh, really?
and that's it.
Hmm.
There's no deep half. There's no spider guard. There's no lasso guard. There's no X guard. There's no single leg X, although they kind of are doing single leg X when they do the ankle lock,
Are they
the Achilles lock, but they don't
doing
know that it's
spider? You
there's
said there's no spider.
nope,
Really?
nope. When I was a white belt, spider guard was in the curriculum. Paul removed it. So to simplify things, which I don't disagree with. Now that's not to say these people don't pick it up along the way.
Yeah.
It's
Like
not like they're in such a bubble that they're unaware of. I mean, first of all, they can study it themselves, but you know, generally, there'll always be that smaller person like, man, how do I keep people off me? And then, one of the coaches will be like, well, you could put your foot in the crook of their elbow,
yeah.
and that's called spider guard. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So it's kind of like, what's the progression of teaching people stuff? And I do think brand new, like, let's just put it this way. You and I are taking our advanced gi class, and then a bunch of brand new blue belts enter, and they're lost. That's my impression.
Hmm. I feel as though that could be a result of them not being white belts long enough.
Um, See, I think that could be like lessened if it were encouraged more for 4 stripe white belts to start taking the advanced class. Because I found that that's what I was doing at the end of my white belt tenure is because I just like to train. I wanted to get another hour on the mat. So
Right.
I asked Paul like, "Hey, can I do advanced class?" And he said our rule is if you have I was even asking when I was a 3 stripe white belt sometimes, but he's like, once you have 4 stripes, you can do it, like you don't have to ask per
Right.
se,
Right.
like a
Right.
4 stripe white belt's allowed. So I think that as long as the white belt's focus is still on the fundamental curriculum, getting exposed to what's coming in advanced means they don't get like bowled over with new material. when
Okay, so it
I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying, or do you disagree that there's like an overwhelming amount of new material once you hit blue belt?
I mean my maybe I'm being very like I guess given the current state of the, of the curriculum, I can see how that happens. Um, I I don't. To me, though, that means it's an issue of they're not shown enough as white belts. Like the idea of like what is. Let's take a look at the word like fundamental, right? Like because we're starting to split hairs a little bit here. Like what is the general idea of foundations? Like the it's like 10 lessons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the one of them is what just to kind of what go through it. It's like
So there are 10 lessons that cover the. We're claiming there are 5 basic positions in jiu-jitsu: close guard, half guard, side control, mount, and back mount. So we're omitting knee on stomach. We're omitting.
the idea of an open guard altogether. Because that's what I'm
Yes,
hearing.
yes.
Interesting. Okay.
This is in foundation.
No,
So
no, I got
everything
it.
is with connection. We're omitting knee on stomach. We're omitting uh, open guard concepts, guard retention. We're omitting for open guard, like basic open guard retention concepts. We're omitting, you know, more, diving into turtle.
Right.
So, but I think those 5 positions: close guard, half guard, side control, mount, and back mount, that's definitely an 80% kind of thing.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
then that's what foundations is, and the goal is they know what the position is. They learn one thing to do on it defensively and offensively. Well, from bottom and from top, because you have 2 people, so you're either
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
position from the perspective of being on bottom or on top. So that's the lesson. So for back mount, how do you attack? How do you control and how do you attack a rear naked choke? When it's the reverse, it's how do I escape back mount? How do I break alignment and escape the position? Either going into mount, half guard, or close guard. Do we focus on those 3 things so much? No, we focus more on breaking alignment and turning the right weight in order to do that.
Mhm.
So, I think the fundamentals curriculum is, intentionally reduced to also like keep their focus on things so that they're not overwhelmed with like too many different techniques. However, I kind of touched on this with you on the phone, or not on the phone, but texting with you yesterday, because I spent a significant piece of time speaking to our friend Brian McKenzie, who, as you know, you know, has a slew of experience and knows a bunch of different techniques. But what he and I were talking about is, I was like, you know what, man, for a while I thought jujitsu was really complicated. In a way, it is complicated because there are all these different techniques you can learn. But in another way, it's actually really, really simple.
Yeah.
As long as you understand basic principles, then you can invent all those other techniques that people just teach on their own. Like there's too much, there's too many techniques being taught in isolation
Yes.
instead of, I don't care so much about the techniques. Here are principles. If you adhere to the principles, you'll be safe for the most part. There might be a trick or two that you just have to experience once to learn it. But if you follow these principles when it comes to posture, when it comes to placement, when it comes to center of gravity and alignment, you'll be fine, and you can invent the jujitsu.
Exactly. And that's yes. Like jujitsu is. I mean, and we've talked about it so many times at this point, but isn't it? people learn the rules of music, right? And then you compose the music, then you compose a song later on, right? Like it's that, like, you know, if all you're doing is just teaching the same song a bunch, you know, like then jiu-jitsu doesn't grow, and it doesn't evolve, and it to try to teach something the using the idea of like technique for technique, like at that point it's truly, I mean, it's an endless journey regardless, right? But it's an inefficient way of doing it because you're always looking for, because like, it's hard to say, but like if you teach technique for technique and then you throw in one variable, then the idea of like addressing that variable now in the realm of the technique you're originally showing, like it just becomes this infinitely growing branch of things, right? Like, and it's an inefficient way of teaching and learning, for that matter, versus, like you said, like learning proper posture, learning proper alignment, learning how to use that posture and alignment to create pressure, right? Like, and connection. Like, that's, people will figure it out on them on their own. um, I've learned a lot from teaching a lot more recently, is that people, I tend to be an overcorrector, and I worry too much about minutia and just like minor details. Um, when I shouldn't. I should worry more about the things like alignment and more about the underlying principle. And as much as I preach about um, the minutia, I actually wasn't. Or excuse, as much as I preach about not worrying about minutia, I actually was teaching it, right? So I've just worried a lot less about it, and let people kind of like find their way of just showing the technique, showing the key concepts behind it, and go, and letting water flow where it will. And it seemed to be produce a lot less frustration on my part because they're not doing it exactly step for step for step like I taught them, and it puts less pressure on the student to do it step for step for step, and you know, and if they forget, you know, step 8 and they go straight from 7 to 9, they're not like kicking themselves like, oh my god, I forgot a step, right? So it just produces but they're still getting it right. The result is the same. So I think me worrying about less about that bullshit and more about just like, are they getting the technique at the very end, despite a couple hiccups or whatever the case is, or maybe it's not a hiccup. Maybe they just, their body and their attributes allow them to skip this step or whatever the case is. Then so be it, right? As long as they're not doing something actively wrong.
I think that I agree with what you're saying. I think the trap that we all fall into is jujitsu's cool. We think it's cool, at least. And when something cool works for us, we're like, I need to show them this. When that was only cool to us because we spent hours and hours doing this technique, doing other stuff, and then we had a little breakthrough. But the breakthrough only is a breakthrough because we had put in the hours before and kind of, let's say, mastered the technique up until this point. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like this whole like monopolita setup that I've been talking about for the past few weeks, where you get, where you're in a mounted position, but your opponent's on their side and you've trapped their underhook in the crook of your hip because you've put so you've got one foot up on the ground and one knee on the ground and they're on their side and you've got this arm trapped in your hip pocket. And I saw Josh Hinger at Masters finish multiple people, and he did a grip with his hand that I'd never seen before. And I was like, son of a bitch. And I tried it and I was like, that's amazing. But as much as what do I want to do? I want to go and blurt this out to everyone I see because I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
But in reality, I'm not doing anyone any service unless they've actually been doing the exact same thing I've been doing and practicing this move. Otherwise, I should be, if I want to blurt anything out to them, it should be the virtues of inside position, whether it's hands or legs or anything,
Right, yeah.
Don't let anyone get inside you. What does that mean? Well, that means your frame should be on the inside. Your feet should be on the inside. All this stuff. That's going to help the majority of the jiu-jitsu population. That's going to help the majority of the population get better, that detail that I'm freaking out about is literally probably only really applicable to someone in a very similar situation as me, who's been doing this move for a little, been experimenting with, been seeing where it works, where it fails. And then you're like, holy shit, that's amazing. That works. But all that other stuff is probably lost. It's like you're, it's, let's go to the classic analogy. It's like fiddling with the antenna on top of the big tower instead of helping the foundational pieces at the bottom.
Right. Or just making sure that the signal is even coming through.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so that's where, so where do we start drawing the line to delineate where something like, where do we draw the line to really put a hard line between what's considered teaching a system, right? Like the whatever the monoplata system you talked about recently, versus teaching a principle, right? Because you teach principles like the delivery systems are just that. They're a delivery system to showcase whatever principles they are, right? So we have to use specific examples to demonstrate, but at what point can you start distilling where you're still illustrating that principle, the essence, the platonic perfect illustration of it, right? How do you where do you draw that line?
Yeah, so I think drawing the line is a question of maturing our coaching as a community. You know, if you go to a wrestling practice, they do teach moves too, but the emphasis is on principles.
Are they? I've not been to a. I can't speak for it, so I'm not a wrestler. I've
Okay,
been,
well, okay. Let me take it. Let me take a step back. Let me take a step. I'm making that leap, based on one class that I had with Bubba.
Okay.
So everyone can roll their eyes and be like, okay, well, you had a class. But this is speaking with other people. I'm just thinking about other sports. I'm thinking about baseball, tennis, sports that again, I will stand by my claim that jiu-jitsu is a very young sport. It hasn't matured much.
Yes.
And I think we are feeling the effects of jiu-jitsu first being taught in this country in garages to Americans in Southern California by Brazilians via private lessons, where how do you sell private lessons? You show someone a trick, they think it's cool, then they want to learn another trick. And I say that lovingly because they're not tricks. It's cool jujitsu moves, but they're showing you a cool move because you're like, I just learned this cool move. I learned the omoplata. I learned the armbar. I learned how to get out of mount. Where instead of teaching them, this is principal posture when it comes to being on bottom. You should never be giving up underhooks. You should have your arms tight, and maybe that's not entirely right. But what I'm saying is, just stances. Like I was talking to Brian about this yesterday. I was like, all this stuff about inside position and posture and stuff. It's like, oh my God, this is the same thing that, guess what, wrestlers do when they're trying to, like, in just their normal stance. They're
Yeah,
doing all
that's
these
why
things.
they keep their elbows tight, right? Like
Exactly. They don't want people to get inside them. So I think you need to teach techniques, but I think the emphasis of the class should be on principle, and the technique is an example of the principle. Instead of, here's a technique, and then as you get more experience in jiu-jitsu, you're going to see the commonalities and start to understand the principles later.
Okay, so let's look at a move that we all know, the Kimura, right?
Okay.
So how do you think we should address the Kimura? So we say, instead of saying today, guys, we're learning the Kimura. Today we should be looking at it and say, hey guys, how does a shoulder work, right? Like, it's a ball and socket joint, blah, blah, blah. We our arms function better in front of us than behind us. So what do we have to do to be able to, how do we deconstruct getting a person's arm behind them in this fashion?
So now this is just me. This is my opinion. So I haven't given any thought to this extensively, but my opinion is teaching the Kimura is teaching the Kimura lock from a control perspective, and where you can get it is an afterthought that you learn in other classes.
Okay. All right.
So it's like
So this is like a
this is,
pre thing, right? Like you're teaching from the end backwards.
I mean, I don't even
Really?
care about finishing it so much. I mean, the finish just comes as a result of, oh, I'm in this position, I can finish it. But it's like, this is how your grip should be. This is how their arm should be orientated. This is where their arm should be in respect to your body, that sort of thing. Because there are differences when you're like, obviously the Kimura trap, it's in a slightly different position than if you're attacking a Kimura submission from
Like a closed
close
guard. Yeah,
guard.
of course.
But at the end of the day, I think it's, again, looking at it right now, like put on the spot. To me, it's more important. What's the grip? How do you hold their wrist? How much of the wrist do you hold? How do you hold my own wrist? And what's the structure we're trying to form with their arm with respect to my two arms? And how do we maximize the leverage of this 2-on-1 grip? And then you can show them, like, hey, you can finish. If you get this position here, let's say side control, you can just finish the Kimura this way,
Right.
in terms of, finishing. Like, if you want to finish, it's all about moving this wrist in this direction, moving the arm and wrist in this direction with respect to their body and your body. But to me, it's just that. And that to me isn't an auxiliary thing. It's an important control thing, especially for attacking. But to me, a more important thing would be just like inside position. What does it mean? Inside position. Why is it so important? And it's going to come up everywhere. And when it comes to guard passing, it's like they're trying to enter this space between your knee and your elbows. So if I can keep
exactly.
my knees and elbows connected, Paul showed me a drill that he saw a black belt do with beginners. I was like, I'll be damned, this is amazing. Like, we should do this all the time. And he was like, this guy would make, and I forget the black belt's name, unfortunately, so I apologize. But Paul describes that he would put the new student on their back. He would have them raise their knees to their chest and connect their knees and elbows.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they'd have someone else just lay on top of them and just move around. And he would tell the person about him, keep your knees and elbows connected. And they would see how they could support the person's weight, and that these guys couldn't. They would try and get in, and they couldn't.
And you're teaching
And
the principle of it, right?
then he would put them just on their elbows. And the first thing these people do now, out of habit, is bring both their knees in to help. And now their knees get involved, and they've connected their knees and elbows.
Interesting.
That, to me, is where we need to be going, and not this is an elbow escape.
So, interestingly, I used to do a kids game when I taught kids class. And it involved the little, like, 10-pound medicine balls that look like little basketballs, right? Or I would only allow the child protecting the ball to only hold it with their knees and elbows. And I would tell the kid on top to start in basically referee's position and try to isolate a limb to help get that ball away. So, is it to say that's should we be teaching based on little games like that? So, but all that does is that illustrates the principle, right? It doesn't. So, where do you start differentiating to? Because to me, that's almost a foundational thing, right? Not necessarily a fundamental thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we start breaking away once they've established these foundations? These super fundamental movements, not even moves, and start adding actual jujitsu to it. Like, because I'm actually I having been on my back for the past 2 days, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos of Globetrotter stuff too, And there's one of I believe it was Chris Howder's wife called. She did one called the Impassable Guard. Have you seen that?
Hmm. I did. I think I gave up on it midway through. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of her teaching style.
I wasn't either, but she did show some very very good drills.
Hmm.
Um, I I didn't find her to be all that funny, as funny as she thought she was. Um, when you're like indicating to the audience when you're supposed to laugh, that means you're probably not very funny. But anyways, so she was doing a drill where basically, I mean, you probably saw it, where you're basically sitting with your hips, with your knees pulled to your chest, and you're maintaining that throughout a range of different passing pressures. There was no, and I thought that was like, man, like this is something I probably actually did as a white belt, and somebody had me do, and that we're not. I mean, I don't see enough of now, but it definitely, of all things, taught me how to keep my knees to my chest. Right? Um, do you think because of the explosion of jujitsu um, techniques and whatnot, just that there's so many different systems out there now, and there's like information overload, that we've gotten away from teaching simple things like that to illustrate a simple principle that will stick with somebody a lot longer than the 10 sequence system that.
Well, I don't even know if we were doing it in the first place, because my inkling is historically we were teaching an individual technique or a collection of technique. That to me is like the classic jiu-jitsu class.
Yeah,
You learn 5 different techniques or 3 different
that are
techniques,
all unrelated.
yeah, they're unrelated, right? You do a warm up. Here's a technique. Here's another technique. Here's a technique. All right, roll. And that again, I'm not. I think some of that is at least in part due to the fact that the people being taught our first black belts in the United States were being taught by privates, where
Yes.
this is how they were. This is how knowledge was disseminated, and I think that's influenced how it's being taught because they just regurgitate the lessons that they were taught, but they're not teaching it as much as I'd like to say. They're not teaching like you would teach a kids class, like a junior program, where you're like, almost because of where we think a child's cognitive level is versus an adult, we feel like we can't go into all the details that we would with an adult when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So we resort to teaching them simpler concepts, when in fact the simpler concepts is
It's
probably what
getting
we should
through
be doing with everybody.
yeah, like
So uh, I think I think there is, again, we've talked about it, there's a pull between what is the absolute best way to develop a new student as quickly as possible, and how do you keep a new student engaged, you know, the most. And those two things are not entirely aligned.
yeah, that's
I do
a
think
yeah.
as someone gets better, they will get more engaged. But if you had them just drill very important movements until they did them very well, that might not be fun for them because it's just too mechanical. It's like work. It's like drudgery. When you could just throw someone out there and they roll around the mat, they don't know, they're clueless about what they're doing, but you know, hormones suddenly got released in their brains that they've never had before. They got an amazing workout. There was some adrenaline, and they're like, "That was amazing," even though productive wise, outside of just getting their body conditioned, it probably didn't do much to develop their technique and make them a better jujitsu person, or improve their technique at least,
Yeah, so this kind of it begs the question. I kind of, because of the combined classes lately, whether I was helping teach or just trying to get some extra reps in and that sort of thing, I've been able to see a lot more white belts in action, which I think I lose sight of a lot, right? Because I just generally just being exposed to higher belts and that sort of thing, and teaching.
That sounds like a great Instagram,
What's that?
uh, a great Instagram account. White belts in action.
White belts in action. Man, that'd be like the influencers in the wild. We'll have to I'll have to constantly have my phone on me, videotaping white belts doing dumb shit. Um, you know.
I mean, I'm sure we could get submissions.
Oh yeah, that'll be a real good one. But then, like a lot of them end up getting staged at the very end, which is kind of where I see influencers in the wild going right now. They took the fun out of it. But I've noticed. So we've been doing the quote non-technical warm-ups right before classes, where it's like 5 minutes of running around, and I can't stress it enough at this point, especially seeing it actually in action, is mindless movement without context, like shrimping, for example. Do we need to go back to what you and I had talked about a long time ago and kind of constantly harp on at this point? Is learning jujitsu beyond, excuse me, the introduction to jujitsu beyond even the foundations class, and should it, is there a foundations to foundations? Is there a prerequisite where they just need to learn the basic movements in the first place? Right? Like, not there's a wrong way to shrimp or whatever the case is, but there's definitely a wrong way to shrimp, right? I see it all the time. And if people don't even know why you're shrimping, like what is the purpose of it? And I don't know if this is something you necessarily cover in foundations. I think if there was, for example, just a body in front of somebody when they're shrimping, like just the simple motion of, you do like a fake pass, and you walk up their hip, and it forces them to post their hands on their shin and shrimp that way. Like, I think that puts a lot of context into the idea of moving yourself away, which is what the idea of a shrimp is, right?
Except, okay, so I want to be the jiu-jitsu nerd with you right now. Most modern guard players don't advocate shrimping for retention. They advocate bringing the outside leg over to the far shoulder.
Right, because when they start controlling that bottom leg, right, it makes it hard. I get that, but is that not a matter of interesting?
I mean, where I find shrimping happens is if you're taking someone's back, you shrimp. So it's like if I'm in close guard and I break their center line and I pull their arm to one side and I grab their far lat. So just the classic back take from close guard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have two options. I can try to climb them when they're on their side, or I can just shrimp back, create space for them to kind of fall into so I can put my top hook in. Right? The question is, how do I get my top hook in?
Right.
I can either go up top and risk starting a roll, which, I mean, I'll probably come up because I just like doing that, but you can end up creating a roll because now they'll roll with you, and now, or what Paul likes to do is secure their upper body, and then you have your bottom hook, and then you shrimp out, and then they literally, their butt kind of falls in, and you put your top hook in.
Right.
So I was thinking, does it serve any purpose to do any of these movements? Like I see the purpose and usefulness of jogging around the mat, shuffling inside, shuffling outside, high knees, doing that just to get blood moving.
Sure.
Like I see merit. I mean, we could do jumping jacks or burpees for all I care. You know what I mean? But just something to start to warm the body up. Ideally, we probably stretch a little bit after we do that, so the likelihood of injury is less. But you warm up, then you do a little stretching, but more, mobility stuff, just loosening hips, whatever. Why don't we then? Because this is just me. What would you say to, we walk into class and you watch me give a class, and I have people jog around for whatever, couple minutes just to get loose, and I was like, pair up, and person on top is trying to get between your legs and your elbows. They're trying to pass your guard. Person on bottom, don't let that happen. You can't play guard, and they can't really do any pass. Like, this is strictly not like
no instruction,
as non-technical as you can be. Like, I don't want you to like grab grips and long step. I don't want you to enter in the guard and try to knee slice. I want you to just try and go around them and burrow your way in. And they have to kind of follow. So it's a lot of circling and it's a lot of
A lot of prying. Yeah.
Toreando-ish kind of stuff. But that's it.
But it's not Toreandoing because you can't. You're saying they can't. But the person on top, or excuse me, the person on bottom, if they're not, I mean, like, what are the parameters that they're allowed to do? I'm missing something.
All they have to do is keep their knees to their elbows the whole time, and just kind of circle with them.
Okay, so you're basically
Right.
you're doing the how does wife drill then? Like,
Okay, that's
you
the Howder's wife. Okay.
yeah. So you're like bottom person, and that definitely it illustrates to the bottom person the importance of keeping your elbows to your knees, right? Like keeping your body a V. Even if it involves like that, there's a split second where it can break, right? Like if you're actively trying to pull your knees
To
back to your
me,
chest.
if you connect your knee and elbow, there is still a way they can get in. They have to circle and burrow in to do it.
Right.
Now, if you stay where you are, they will circle, burrow, and pass your guard and open you up, and they won. You know, but then if you move, you can continue to defend yourself. But by moving, you have to put your foot on the ground. Generally, you have to do something to weaken the structure to increase mobility.
Right.
And in that transition, there's an even bigger opportunity if that person times things well to actually get in. So I don't know. Maybe people would just hurt themselves or not, and maybe there need to be better rules because I feel like jiu-jitsu people would immediately want to do jiu-jitsu passes. But
This goes back to our lengthy discussion a long
though.
time ago of the idea of, is it better just, I mean, at that point, like, you know, the people learn better if they have to struggle for it and, you know, learn. But if I just showed you a better way to pass off the bat, and I showed you a better way to retain guard off the bat, right? Like, at risk of teaching a specific technique, sometimes it's necessary, just as long as you show the principle. Or you say, okay, you do that drill that you just described, the game, if you want to call it that, for 5 minutes, you know, or 10 minutes, whatever the case is. And then people are either frustrated or they start figuring it out, or the cases, and then they say, all right, so who encountered this situation? Who encountered this situation? Who was, you know, and at that point, that's where you start showing the quote, the jujitsu technique behind it, right? A better way, more efficient way of doing things. Because I would like to think that given an infinite amount of time, people playing these games, they would eventually come to the conclusion of those jujitsu techniques, right? Because that's how the jiu-jitsu techniques came into place in the first place, is by way of countless hours of experimentation, right? Getting your guard passed and whatnot and trying it again. Now, if we have the opportunity to go ahead and pass that technique directly on and say, this is a best practice, right? As of right now, because, you know, it's a scientific method. As of right now, this is what works and why, then what's wrong with doing that as well? Save a hell of a lot of time. But you run the risk of the student not worrying about the underlying stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, how can we best give parameters to students where they're led in the direction of doing jiu-jitsu even though they don't know they're doing jiu-jitsu. You know, like if you tell someone you need to get between their elbows and their legs to win, I'm not telling them you have to pass their guard. I'm telling them, but they are. You know what I mean? Whereas if I told them do a over-under pass or do a pass, now they're going to try to pass the guard, but they didn't really know what the objective was. The objective was to get between the elbows and the legs.
Then that's just a failure to properly define the tasks, right?
Yeah, but to go back to what you said, it's like if you give them the objective first in non-jujitsu terms, have them attempt it, and then give them a jujitsu explanation, and then you can even say, "Oh, by the way, everything you do when we say guard pass, that's what you're doing."
Right.
You know, it's just ways to get. Even though we might not just run around and insert ourselves. These are ways to get by the legs and between the legs. And again, inside position, which to me, like inside position explains underhooks, it explains butterfly hooks, it explains a lot of grips. It explains hand fighting in back mount. It explains defending. It explains getting out of side control. It explains getting out of mount to a degree. It's hard for me to find counterexamples. And inside position also explains, to me, goes with Pritt's idea of never giving up underhooks. If
Yeah.
I
Oh
keep
yeah.
my hands inside, I'm also pinching my elbow, so I'm not giving up underhooks. Underhooks would be inside position for them.
But isn't I mean? So yes, agreed. But then how the
Here's
hell
my
do you even
point.
begin teaching a technique then? If your goal is to if you're always working to the extremely top 10,000 foot view of inside position, like how do you even?
Because if you look at a wrestling coach or a tennis coach or a baseball coach, what they shout again and again and again when people are working on specific techniques is the inside position. They're not saying, I want to see get a good grip on the collar, get a good grip on the collar. They're all shouting inside position, inside position. Don't forget, you need to get what they're harping on, even though they're teaching a specific technique, is the principle. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, because they are older sports, more mature sports, coaches have learned you're always harping on the principle, because if they can remember anything, it's that, because that's the least amount of information they need to survive, defend themselves, and perform.
Okay,
And
and that's
that's
fair. Okay, so let's put that in the context of, for example, let's see, you had grappled. What was the situation you were in? For example, I'm sorry, the second match. No,
at Masters Worlds.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of any sort of context that you would have where you might have been coached one thing, but then again, Paul wasn't really shouting anything at you, right? Like, oh,
Well,
okay.
I don't think in when you're coaching an athlete when they're competing, that might be a different scenario per se. Than people doing reps on the mat, where they just where it gets grained into them. But I would say what wasn't in my mind that led to this was I had sloppy posture when I was doing a double underpass.
Okay. So what could he have said that would have helped you? I'm just literally using as an example because it's immediate, right? Or okay, let's think of what's his name, Cyborg screaming at his blue belt, like he was in a guy's guard. The guy was working a cross collar. You said Cyborg was just screaming,
I mean,
"Fight that!" right, or something.
to me, both things, both my case and this guy's case, were posture. Like if the blue belt we're talking about was sitting back and not leaning so much forward, it would have been a lot harder for his opponent to reach into the back of his neck
Yes.
and start attacking a cross choke. Maggie, Cyborg's wife, was correctly saying, anytime he grabs that, you need to pummel your head under to the other side to take away the cross, so then he has to re-grip. But the larger issue is he's getting to your neck
Because you're posturing.
because you're leaning forward a little bit. You know what I mean?
But
So
at that moment, it's not the correct time to scream a top level thing, right? Like Maggie was doing
That
it.
I'm that's not what I was referring to. So that's debatable. You know, it probably could help, but only if that person knows when you say posture, they know what you're talking about. The key about coaching see, the difference to me is one is kind of like almost like conditioning or brainwashing, and that's the coaching part. The other is communicating an athlete in a competitive situation, not the training mat, instructions that they can clearly understand and act upon.
Yes.
So if you can say posture, and they know exactly what you're talking about, then that's great. We're on the same page. I would argue that's probably ambiguous.
That's extremely
Whereas
ambiguous. Yeah.
whereas if you're on just on the training mat and everyone is working, um, let's just say close guard, passing the close guard, you know, and all I'm shouting is like, good posture, good posture. And maybe this is old school like coaching that's been shown to not work. I think what you're really doing is you're slowly brainwashing the students to know like I need to have good posture, and we keep practicing that. This is the important thing. Posture, spinal alignment,
Yeah.
my center of gravity over my hips. I'm not leaning too far forward, you know. And maybe the guy's saying posture, good center of gravity. You're not leaning too far forward, and it's not specific instruction. Everyone could be doing it perfectly already. You know what I mean? And really, it's about grips and stuff. But that's the individual attention. Like, hey, man, you need to adjust your grip here and here. But just the overall thing of pounding it into these guys' skulls is that, you know, I never had it pounded into my skull that I needed to keep my elbows, that I should never give up underhooks. Whereas that's what, if you go with Paul, he's never giving up underhooks. If you roll with anybody good, they're not giving you underhooks,
Right.
But I wasn't told that. It's like an epiphany you have later. Whereas I'm making the argument that it might be a better class if we had that. And let's just go total cliche. The drill sergeant head coach, waltzing around, bellowing that repeatedly while also actually making specific corrections for people. But it's just sort of the almost like a mnemonic,
Yeah.
even though
It's
it's
like
not
a
a mnemonic,
mantra, right? Like,
a mantra. Yeah, you know, so that when in doubt, that thing is in their head.
yeah.
You know, and I'll use an example that I heard. Like, I had a student from foundations class tell me, "I hear you in my head every time I roll. Thank you so much for what I really appreciate what you taught me in foundations, because whenever I roll now in fundamentals class, you're in my head sometimes with things, and I'm always trying to get the bicep." And that was a big thing I harped on. I was like, guys, if they're passing your guard, if you can get to their bicep before they get around your head, if you can get to their bicep before they cross face you, you're in good shape. Keep on the bicep. And that got through to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think if you listen to wrestling coaches, they all have expressions. You know, when it comes to like takedowns, Bubba used 3 feet in a line in terms of your opponent's 1 foot and your 2 feet when attacking a single leg. So it's like my 2 feet and then his 1 foot that I'm attacking. Um, Victor always said that his wrestling coach always had these little expressions. One was, well, I can't. I won't repeat it on air because is actually kind of offensive. But there were expressions. If you've heard Mike Tyson speak, Mike Tyson uses expressions when it talks about boxing. Have you ever heard like him talk about boxing and he just will say an expression that clearly he didn't come up with on the spot, but it's something that was told to him probably many times and it's stuck with him and it's kind of rhymey and catchy?
Oh, sure. I mean, like, we do that in jiu-jitsu, right? I'm trying to think of
Well, what do
something
we do
now.
that? What's an example of that in jiu-jitsu?
I'm trying to think of something. I mean, like,
Because I think there's an absence of that in jiu-jitsu.
is it okay? So there's an absence of that in jiu-jitsu.
In my opinion.
I mean, yeah, I guess that there's. I'm leaning back to something as simple as, for example, use the wrestling example, where the week and a half or 2 weeks or it was that I wrestled in high school, and there's nothing that will ever get heel toe knee follow out of my head in learning how to do a proper drop step, right?
Bingo.
Right, like, and it's
And how long were you doing that? How long were you doing that? 2 weeks, you said?
2 weeks, 2 3 weeks, I think, at the
That's
most.
what I'm
I don't
saying.
even remember, to be honest. I think it was such a short amount of time, like, and I still remember heel toe knee follow, and I because of that I can do a drop step properly.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we? Yeah, maybe we're just missing these little mantras that like the essence of each technique, right? Like T-Rex arms. You hear that a lot in wrestling, right?
Yeah.
You hear T-Rex arms. You hear, I don't box enough, but all right. So our homework, Noah, we need to start coming up with like
We're
little
going to be the
mnemonics.
catchphrase guys.
Yeah,
The catchphrase guys.
I
When
think
they're sitting too far back in the guard. It's like how do you make something rhyme? It's like when they're sitting too far in their rump, go for the bump.
yeah, or just something, or I mean, I say balls to belly a lot for attacking close guard because I'm tired of beating
Okay,
people.
so I've told people, okay, so I'll show you how this does not work. I've told people in close guard, hey, bring your knees to your chest. Instead of pulling me down with your arms, that's small muscle against big muscle. Use big muscle against big muscle. Bring your knees to your chest. And you know what they do?
They open their legs.
They open their legs.
Yeah, they open their legs, don't they? Yeah.
And I'm like, no. So, that's not what people think of. That when you say that, that's not what they think of. What we're trying to get them to do is not what they think of.
Yeah. So that's a fault of ours, right? We,
We got to figure out that language that's
you know
universal.
what I think people do is, and just where I'm using close guard as an example because you just mentioned it. We talk so much about the ankles, crossing your ankles. What we should really be telling them is squeeze their hips with your thighs, right?
Yeah.
Because people when you're saying cross your ankles, they're focused on the lower leg, the weakest part of your legs and your knees and whatnot, and pulling with you're not pulling with anything when they should
Well, I
be.
think once you tell people like now we're going to go live, then they immediately start squeezing for dear life. They recruit every muscle
Yeah.
in their body.
Yeah, that's true too. And they tire themselves out after 30 seconds.
But do you think? Okay, so I'm going to ask you because you're more experienced with close guard. Are close guard players actually scissoring their legs forward to create the inward pressure, or are they actually pinching with their inner thighs?
I am planking my body. I'm bridging.
Okay, so you're using more your quads.
Yes, and my glutes.
Yeah.
My ankles are not like, I'm not actively trying to twist my ankles more like the fucking thing you use on
You're
a
almost
bread.
trying to bring your knees together. You're not opening your knees apart.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which this is a movement that I think is coming up more and more that I'm seeing that I don't feel like, well, again, from in my journey wasn't emphasized nearly as much as I am realizing it needs to be,
What's that?
which
Close
is
guard?
no, beyond that, just that motion. It's like if you think about the omoplata, the intermediate step for finishing the omoplata is
Pulling your knees to your chest, right? Like pulling your.
no, it's the opposite. What I'm saying is you scissor your legs forward, and I'm essentially doing a quad extension with my feet crossed, but it's a quad extension. I'm not pinching my legs together. So it's all about, and it's same with single leg X. Single leg X is not I pinch my legs together. It's I scissor my legs to
Yes.
create the tension. So how do you keep something between your legs? You don't keep something between your legs by using your groin muscles, which are very
Yeah,
weak,
yeah,
to pinch
your
your inner
adductors. You're
thigh,
using your
but
hips.
you're using your quads, your hips, your glutes, and you're creating tension just by just crossing your legs and extending legs just across each other, and now there's tension that you can hold a lot more relaxed using bigger muscles.
So that's interesting that you say that, because, like, for example, what do we teach somebody to do to tighten a triangle? What do people always scream out?
Well, what people scream out is cut the angle.
I also hear a lot like squeeze your knees.
Yeah.
But to your point, Ryan Hall brings up, he's like, if you what you should be telling them is do a leg press with the leg that's over the ankle, and do a leg curl with the leg that's under the ankle,
Bingo.
right? Because at that point you're using your entire hip and your spinal erectors, your entire posterior chain for that matter, to push down on the instep of the leg that is doing the trapping, right? And as you are curling the leg, which is you're using your hamstring and not your adductors, to your point, those are your two huge strong muscles that are going to tighten up a triangle a lot more.
There's also a really cool triangle variant that I actually saw taught by your favorite, Rafael Lovato Jr.
How many
Brother.
ums did he?
No, but it was cool, and it was simple. It's like he's like, you don't even need to lock a triangle. If you get the diamond on somebody,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure the leg that's would be the chopping leg is on bottom and the other leg is over that ankle. And then he says just squeeze your legs together, squeeze your thighs together and pull the head. And what we're saying is if you do that whole curl and leg press, so a better way to create that squeeze, all you're doing is a head and arm choke
Yeah.
with your legs and you pull on the head to finish it. And it's a great way to finish. In fact, to me, it's a better way to finish a front triangle when you're looking straight at the guy
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
versus if you do cut the angle, then yeah, you want to go to a more traditional triangle because now you can actually that triangle lock makes sense. But otherwise, swoosh his shoulder right into the side of his neck
Yeah.
and make it feel like an arm triangle. And that works. And it works great. Now I've done that. I did that with Victor. I've shown that to Mike. Like I tried on Victor, and Victor's good about giving me a realistic look about like, yeah, this sucks, but I wouldn't tap,
Mm-hmm.
or no, I'm going to go to sleep. And I showed that to Mike with his long legs, and and he's been hitting triangles, and I'm like, this could help you, bro. You don't even need to like rotate. If you can just get him in a diamond, just like you got long enough arms, you can reach their head.
So it's actually going against what you and I are talking about using your stronger, bigger muscles. But
No, what I said is you can what I just said is you can use the Ryan Hall method to do this. He says pinch, but in reality, when he says pinch, what I'm saying is anytime you say pinch with your legs, you can do a better version of pinching by not recruiting your groin muscles to do this, but instead doing that cross your legs and do that leg press hamstring curl idea to create the same amount of pressure between your legs. It's like if I want to break a watermelon, I wouldn't break the watermelon by putting it between my thighs and squeezing inward. I would put it between my thighs and I would do the press outward
right.
and really in doing so drive my kneecaps together using my quad. I'm doing it right now. I'm just driving my quads into one another and I'm using my quad muscles. There's no groin or interior thigh being used here. That's how you create the pressure between your legs. It's all consistent, bro.
Yeah,
We're
these
we're
underlying
solving jujitsu
principles.
right now. As always, we are solving
So
jujitsu.
we need to say, crush the watermelon.
Exactly.
That's what we need. That's the mnemonic. Crush the watermelon, guys. All right. So what's our mnemonic for? How about an armbar?
I mean, the biggest thing with the armbar, there are two things. There's what's going on with your lower body, and what's going on with the upper
And
body.
what's going on with their upper arm?
Yeah. So to me, the main thing is like you need to have that upper arm, that tricep glued to your chest or glued to your torso. And then thumbs always pointing up. Like that's, I guess, that's good for beginners is thumb up. Although there are exceptions, like you're really breaking in the direction. Like
You're just pulling in the direction of the pinky. Is what you're really
yeah,
doing.
I don't know, man. No one's done it before. We need time to do this.
It'll take some time, right? Like we need to distill the essence of each tech. Oh, so that's the thing too, right? Like there's the idea, not to bite off of BJJ fanatics, but if you look at go further faster, right? Those are
Mhm.
positional systems. And if you look at enter the systems, those are all submission systems, right? So we
Mhm.
need to look at the core principles of positions and the core principles of submissions to distill what makes each submission or position that.
I mean, are we saying that what we're talking about is we need to distill static positions and submissions, and then the next step up from that is systems, and systems involve movement, and then like are we saying are we basically talking about stuff that's independent of another person in a way?
Yeah, I mean, well, not necessarily though, because if okay, so it's not independent of another person because I mean, it all really goes back to the damn mind map things, right? Or road maps,
Yeah,
jujitsu.
but I'm just thinking like I feel like what we're talking about comes even before systems. Like if I just tell people the principle of inside position when it comes to being on bottom, that that is just statically important. And then the system is how can I use dynamic movement from bottom to create kazushi and space so I can escape either by doing an elbow escape or rolling the guy over or doing any other sort of escape, getting a frame on the bicep somehow. Like that to me is a system.
Yes.
But before that, it's don't give up underhooks, keep everything tight.
Oh my god. What you know what we're doing is this is Preet, right?
Oh Jesus.
It's
Fuck you,
literally
Preet.
it literally is Preet. Right? Like how do I passing somebody's guard? What do I can't assume an unknowledgeable opponent. I have to assume that they're doing everything right. And I have to reverse engineer that. That's literally Preet. Or in this case, I have to assume bottom person, and Paul does an excellent job with this regarding positions 1, 2, and 3, right? And 4 rather, from escaping positions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And he's got this little system for top and bottom. And at that point, because both are so well refined, it's assuming top person and bottom person knows both of it so well, it becomes a timing game, right? Whoever executes it best.
But escaping 2, 3, and 4 for us is like worst case scenario where if you followed the principle, you wouldn't even be in those positions.
Yeah, but you can't assume that you're just going to fall to your back and be uh, uh, a like knees to chest automatically. Like that's just not what
No, I
happens.
know, but at least that's why it's harder now. It was like, oh,
Yes.
I didn't manage to keep my elbows in.
So what is the fixed point in which you say? So I mean, that's the static position you're talking about. At what point do we do we sit there and say, like, for example, I'll use, like, it's hard to say because being on bottom is such, you can be on bottom in so many different, you can be on bottom, knees to your chest, but they're doing this. You can be on bottom, one knee up, one knee down, like kind of the beginning of a shrimp when you think of that way. But like, what is the static position from which you work? And for the most part, if you look at it, right, all good postured, safe, static positions are basically a wrestler stance, right? Even a boxer, right?
Yeah.
Mike Tyson, hunchback stance, chin down, elbows in, right? Because he's protecting inside position. So what we just need to do is teach the hunchback stance everywhere and let people just go. That's we've got it, man. That's a white belt curriculum.
Hunchback guys. Jiu-Jitsu is hunchback.
Hunchback, man. It's or as Gordon called it, a concave back position. Right?
There's a difference between hunchback. The one thing about hunchback though is
Shoulder shrug.
you're not tucking your chin too much. Like I feel like problems arise when if I tuck my chin too much, I get guillotined.
If you
Like
tuck your chin too much, you get guillotined?
yes.
Explain. I'm
Classic example. I come up, people that dive in, I used to do it all the time. I dive in for an underhook from half guard and my head is down on my chin. It's easy for them to
exposes
attack.
the back of your neck to get their armpit over it.
It's like,
Okay.
and if I'm in butterfly guard, the more I bring my head forward, the more easy it is for them to attack
Like a snap
a
down.
rolling guillotine or a snap
Yeah.
down, or if my head's up. So keeping your head in a line, and also if I'm in deep half, the more my head is in alignment with my spine, the better the sweep's going to be if I drop them on their hip. Whereas if I'm looking down and scrunched, there's more likely that my head is going to end up on the wrong side and not in an over-under position, and they can actually attack triangles and attack the back because I'm not on them. So I don't think I I think the hunchback stance is not ideal for all situations. But I think as long as you don't overemphasize the tucking of the chin part, and it's more about bringing.
I don't think it's tucking the chin. That's
up.
the problem. It's the shrugging of the shoulders.
The shrugging of the shoulders. Shrugging of your shoulders is fine.
That's what I'm saying. Like shrugging of the shoulders. When I think hunchback, I don't think. God, I feel so bad saying this now. Like, apologies ahead of time to anybody out there who's a hunchback. It's the raised traps more protecting your neck than it is chin down.
Correct.
That's what I would call more of a hunchback stance, right? Because your chin can still be exposed, but the idea of a hunchback stance, to me at least, especially in using Muay Thai as a frame of reference, is to you want to shorten the lever, right? Your head being your forehead being the end of the lever. And the same for jiu-jitsu, right? That's the shorter the lever, the harder it is for them to extend it, right?
Well, yeah.
So,
and I think another discipline we need to look at more and more as a reference point for jiu-jitsu is powerlifting. Because powerlifters have optimized leverages.
yes.
And alignment and posture, because if they don't, they can't
they
move a maximal amount of, they can't generate a maximal amount of force, or they get hurt too. There's an injury thing. So when it comes to deadlifting, when it comes to clean and jerks and, hang cleans and presses
but
and all this
stuff.
stuff.
That's all linear resistance too, right? Jiu-jitsu, but alignment is what's important that you're learning from them.
If we're talking about structures that can withstand pressure, powerlifting can help you.
Yes, agreed.
And I found myself just the last few days I've rolled with Brian McKenzie, Julia, like not just 200-pound and above, like 250 and above
Yeah.
guys.
Actual heavyweights.
Yeah, super heavyweights or ultra heavyweights. And I'm playing the Ryan half guard, the Ryan Hall half guard, not a traditional half guard. So I'm supine, 1 foot between because they're passing on their knees, right? So, or at least, Julius will stand up more, but I'm supine. I'm not on one side. Like most half guard is taught with a Z, like you teach Z guard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What's a good half guard when you're attacking? Z guard. But in that case, I'm on one hip. This case, I'm on my back, strictly supine. My one knee shield leg is literally my foot is in their crotch and my shin is straight up vertical up their chest. And then my other foot is monitoring their shoulder and just
That's
kind of
very
pressing
unique.
like in like an up kick kind of thing, You could up kick someone if you wanted to,
Do I have this?
Modern half guard.
Oh, okay.
Ryan Hall's modern half guard. Now, there's a lot of MMA application here, and he's not dismissing traditional jiu-jitsu half guard, but those guys can lean into me all day and it doesn't break. Whereas if I'm in Z guard, they can break me down because because I've broken alignment. They're going straight into me, and how do you leg press someone? You leg press by being straight under them and pushing straight up. You don't leg press by turning yourself to one side and then pressing up.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you don't go to Z guard. You don't see people leg pressing in Z guard unless they're doing maybe like a special glute exercise or some like. But if you're trying to leg press the shit out of you're trying to put as many plates on, you're never going to do it that way. You got to be right behind everything. And I was thinking guys would be able to shove my knee to one side or the other. But in order to do that, they have to commit so much effort to do that. They're actually putting themselves out of balance and alignment. So from a defensive structure point of view, it's great. I'm still, how do I make attacks from there? Because I can't come up for underhooks, like I could the other way. So I feel like my attacks are more limited. But in terms of keeping a big guy off me that's put me on my back, it works great. And then I can usually push away and go back to butterfly, which is what I was doing with the big guy. So in terms of strategy, that was working great. Way better than any other half guard I played. So anytime they push me down, Ryan Hall, modern half guard. Knee in the middle, straight up in their chest, monitoring with the other foot. And then, of course, if they stand up, now they're not putting any weight on me, and now you can do a bunch of other stuff. You can enter
your
into
Ashi
legs
positions and
yeah, exactly. I mean that now we're in a different game.
yeah. I'll have to take a look at that. That actually interesting that you. I haven't looked at that obviously, but that would probably lend itself well to my style of grappling.
So here's what made me revisit that. I watched Who's Number One, Kynan versus Hadolfo, that card.
Okay.
And a number of the competitors that played guard played that. So Roberto Jimenez was playing that guard a lot. And I was like, I'll be damned. They're all doing this. And it was keeping people off them. And I was like, and I thought about it, I was like, it makes sense from a defensive, like in terms of not letting your guard get past, it makes sense that I'm going to be, why would I commit to one side right away? Like if they're straight in front of me, I'm going to put my leg straight in front of them, straight up. And now they have to go to a side.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I get that some people say, well, the part of half guard is you do feed them the side. The problem is people are good to getting to the backside if they want. I don't know. It just feels more solid and with a lot less effort. And then if these guys raise up onto one leg, you can immediately grab their ankle. And now you can start entering single leg X, 50-50, leg entanglements, and do stuff from there. So maybe it's a leg entanglement type thing, but I was surprised at how many people did that. Nobody was doing Z guard, traditional Z guard as we saw.
Is that just because I mean, I would gather that that's just that's the evolution of the trends, right? Like people have gotten very good at passing Z guard and whatnot. So that's why they're playing.
Probably. And if people are good at passing Z guard, that's probably because there's a flaw with Z guard in the first place.
Yeah.
You know.
How long before we find the flaw in the modern 50-50?
Uh,
How long? I would say, what, 2 seasons, I will say. Two like full seasons. So I'm going to say a year and a half.
All right, so Chris, as we wind down, because I need to go hit the gym and get some deadlifts in
Yeah, and I've
before
got to go
the
watch
gym.
my little dude while Stacy works out because I cannot work out.
There you go.
But-
Recommendations for our audience. Have you been watching any television series? Have you been binge watching anything?
I just, in my day and a half of bedriddenness, I watched all of Cobra Kai season 3. If you loved season 1 and 2, then you will most certainly love 3. Lots of fun little twists and turns. It's funny.
Did you say that? Isn't the sensei of the bad dojo, like he has like not aged, like he looks the same?
He definitely does. Like
Right.
Martin Cove, Kreese.
Or he has a really good plastic surgeon.
he's basically looked the same since Karate Kid 3, because like between Karate Kid 1 and 3 he aged some, because there's like, I don't know, 15 years between the two. I don't have to go actually look, but between Karate Kid 3 and now he doesn't look that much. I mean, it looks like he hasn't aged at all, you know. And I don't know.
He has access to the fountain of youth, man.
Evidently.
That's what you're going to find.
But like,
out
if you look at
four.
Daniel LaRusso, he looks young, but he's definitely like old. Like he looks frail, like an old, you know, even post middle aged man. Johnny Lawrence, I would say, has aged fairly well. I mean, he looks like a middle aged man, but it's very evident that he's been just taking better care of himself and not allowing decrepitness to set in. But there's some fun little twists and turns. A lot of callbacks. It's obvious that the Cobra Kai writers are playing to they're pandering a lot. So there's a lot of callbacks. While also maintaining a pretty good story moving forward with the youth.
How long are episodes?
It's nice. They're only 27 minutes, which is really nice. So, as you know, my style of watching things is to take something that's 47 minutes, like Mandalorian, and stretch it over 3 viewing periods. They do a really good job writing. You know, like Robert Kirkman. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's the writer for The Walking Dead and Invincible, which is actually coming to Amazon Prime, incidentally. They're doing an animated series for it, and it should be good. But Robert Kirkman always lived by the rule of the end of a comic book. Basically, like, everything's a cliffhanger. Whether it's a panel or a turn of a page, you should always... it should always be a cliffhanger, right? Because you should want the customer, or the reader, rather, to turn the page and to read the next panel, et cetera, et cetera. And I found that recently, especially, man, like the fucking Marvel shows on Netflix are so decompressed, you know, and
they do end on cliffhangers.
They do end on cliffhangers, but each scene,
but there is a lot of dialogue,
a
lot of
exposition. There's so much filler. Where if they could just move the story forward a little quicker, I think I would have enjoyed them a lot more. You know, they were all 12, 13 episodes. I think they all could have really stood to be 9 to 10 episodes. You know, like, how many times do we need to revisit things to see it from this person's perspective? You know, like, I don't... You don't need to give every character in a story their own showcase episode. You know, it should be...
And flashback.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need that. Like, it's... I think at some points, it's nice. You can say a lot more sometimes by saying less. So, ironically, that's coming from me, who I overtalk. But but yeah.
Hey, man, I just saw you the last time you were in class, you got complimented from a student. You're a really good teacher. You explain things very well.
That's probably my strong suit, though. Like, it's not being the one doing the teaching. It's the one doing the correcting. Like, I'm a really good, like, support character, right? Like, I'm like the paladin that's like, I'm going to be hanging out in the back. You fucking go do your battle, and I'll heal you along the way, and smash a couple like orcs along the way. Like that's what I do, right? But being like front and center, that's probably not my strong suit. So, but yeah, what was that dude's name?
John.
John. Okay, he was super nice. He
Yeah, super nice guy.
yeah, really, he's what, white belt? White belt, one stripe, two stripes, and
One stripe. We went through foundations, and his big goal is he's having a kid, and he wants to lose weight for his child.
nice. A good thing to do. You want to be the dad that will be able to whip all the other dads' asses. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
it's a good goal. So we can take
Absolutely.
very seriously the my daddy can beat up your daddy situation. So
Well, listen, Chris, that was 60 episodes. Amazing.
yeah,
I
man,
can't believe we're
we
60
made it.
in. We've made it to 60. Here's to 60 more. Guys, thanks for listening. Check out our sponsor, Crown Rash Guards. They sponsor today's episode. You can go to their website, crownrashguards.com. If you use our promo code BREWS, that's an S at the end, like BJJ and Brews. So if you use just Brews, you'll get 20% off an order of a single rash guard. If you order two, you're going to get 20% off anyway. So check them out. You can also check them out on social media, BJJ and not BJJ and Brews, that's us,
That's yeah.
but Crown Rash Guards on Instagram and social media. They make awesome rash guards. It's an awesome story. It's by Jiu-Jitsu people for Jiu-Jitsu people, and just check them out. We're on social media, BJJ and Brews, on Instagram, on Facebook,
And YouTube.
shoot us an email, and YouTube.
Yeah, man.
Although we don't have the BJJ and Brews handle yet, but we do have a YouTube channel. If you go to our Instagram, you can find the links to all this stuff in our profile. And like I said in the last episode or the episode before, we've seen that we have listeners all across the world. If you're listening and you're from anywhere in the world, even if it's Orlando, Florida, where we're based out of, shoot us a message, shoot us a DM, take a picture and tag us, whatever. Let us know you're listening and where you are, and we'll showcase you the next
And
time
let us
we
know what you're
record an
drinking.
episode. And let us know what you're doing. Whether it's alcoholic or not, it all counts.
Exactly.
So thank you for listening, Chris. Thank you
Hey,
for
quick
joining
thing.
me.
We'll hit it next time. What's your resolution for the year or goal for the year? But we'll talk about that next time.
Oh my goodness, the old resolution. Dude, I don't do the resolution thing, man.
Every day should be a process of improvement.
Every day is improvement. But no, my resolution for this year is to improve my understanding of the top game and passing, so I'm more decisive when I am approached with having to pass someone's guard.
All right. Cool.
What about you?
Stand to pass more.
Okay.
That was a big
You
thing.
old school knee passer, you.
Hey, man. Can't get knocked over if you're already on the ground, right?
I know. Well, there's spider guard, man. You can get all thrown off with that.
That's true. So, but they're extending. They're putting you on the end of their levers, you might say.
Exactly. I just don't, dude. It's just I'm trying to find jiu-jitsu that's not dependent on like finger strength. That's one of my goals is I don't want to, like, I've seen grips violently get ripped out of people's hands, and I wince whenever I see it. So
it's really annoying. So that's the story for another day.
Anyway, Chris, I wish you a speedy recovery. Hope to see you on the mat soon,
Yeah.
and I will catch you down the road.
Yeah, man.